Did you know that parents rank teaching financial literacy as the toughest life skill? That's where Greenlight comes in, the debit card and money app made for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and track spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn how to earn, save, and spend responsibly, while parents have peace of mind knowing smart money habits are being built with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery. That's greenlight.com/Wondery.
Now, do you remember this? In April of 1986, Chernobyl's nuclear reactor exploded. It sent radiation way into the sky, forcing everyone to evacuate, except their pets. That's right, everyone was forced to leave their pets behind due to major safety reasons. Now, after almost 40 years, the original dogs of Chernobyl's multi-generations of descendants of those dogs are still living in Chernobyl City in the Exclusion Zone. Today, Dr. Jennifer Betz of Clean Futures Fund, she joins me. She's their veterinary medical director, and she also leads the Dogs at Chernobyl's program. Now, we're going to get into everything. Their extensive spay and neuter program, the effects of radiation on these dogs, how they continue to survive after all these years, plus we debunk some of those crazy stories about the canine survivors. And some you're really going to be surprised at, and some you're just going to laugh at when you hear them. And by the way, no, they don't glow in the dark. Now, I found this episode so interesting and so insightful, as I too really didn't know what to expect from such a catastrophic event. And I can't wait to hear from you to see what you have to say too.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Markakyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Jennifer Betz. Jennifer, welcome to the show, and I really can't wait to talk to you. I have so many questions for you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, as I was telling you when we were talking before, you do a lot. And so one of the things I want to do is really get into your background, start from back in the days. I'm assuming, are you from the South? Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, originally, yes. I grew up in Florida, and I went to veterinary school in Auburn, Alabama, and then went from Auburn, Alabama, moved out to Portland, Pacific Northwest. I'd never been here before. I just packed up and moved out here, and I never left.
Well, again, like I was telling you earlier, we do have some coincidences. I lived in Huntsville for a while when I was growing up, and then, of course, I went to school in Corvallis. So
Okay.
I've been in a couple of places you've been, but one of the things that you studied that I really want to get into, you do a lot of forensic veterinary work and all that. Let's dig into that before we get into the Chernobyl thing, because you've done a lot and you're doing some really cool things. And I want people get to know you and all the different things you do.
Okay.
So let's just start with what made you, when you decided to go to vet school, what made you decide to get into forensic veterinary? And explain that to me. I think I know, but I'm sure what I think doesn't mean it's right. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, before I ever went to veterinary school, when I was a lot younger, I wanted to go into forensics. I grew up watching Quincy, and that was my thing. And of course, I went different routes and ended up going to veterinary school and forgotten all about the forensics and all of that. But I started doing with my disaster work, working. I'm a intermittent employee for the National Veterinary Response Team for the government, and doing hurricanes, disaster work. We were working, I think it was Hurricane Sandy maybe, in New York. And I became acquaintances with the ASPCA, started working with them, and really started liking it, started doing a lot of more work with them, started working on the dogfighting cases and cockfighting and all of that. And so that's when I became a lot more interested in my original roots of wanting to get into forensics, came back. And so that was the opportunity for me to combine both of what I love, the forensics and veterinary medicine. And there happens to be a master's program at the University of Florida that is for forensics, and decided to take that course while I was still working. And so I continue to work for the ASPCA on cases when needed, going in and doing forensic exams.
So when you go to like a hurricane and you're doing that, I mean, obviously I know what veterinarians do, but what are you doing on relief? Are you gathering the animals, what are you doing?
So as far as hurricanes, usually it's either extracting from areas. A lot of times, like with the ASPCA, they'll set up a huge temporary shelter, and they will need veterinarians that will, be there to examine these animals, do any kind of treatments if they're injured, just the daily care.
Uh-huh.
Large amount of animals are in this area, and some of them are animals that we've pulled off of the street that are injured or have some problems, or some of them are just people have lost their homes and they're staying in a temporary shelter, but they don't allow animals, so they leave them off at the shelter, the temporary shelter that we've set up. So as far as forensics, there's no forensics in the disaster stuff, but that also, with the ASPCA, it also goes into the dog fighting, hoarding cases, puppy mills, those kind of things.
Of course, every time I hear dog fighting, especially here from the South, Michael Vick always comes to my mind too. But is it still real prevalent the way it was? I mean, obviously I don't know anything about it, but is it still a thing, a big thing?
It is. It's it's a lot more people know about it now, but it's still an underworld. It's still a pretty significant. We're still having cases all the time. They're getting smarter in the way that they're hiding things, and they're very secretive. It's kind of a secretive club. As far as cockfighting, that's very, very prevalent in the Hispanic community, and so when you find these different communities all over, you'll always find the cockfighting, and is because it's pretty much legalized outside of the country. So that's not as horrific as the dogs, but it's still significant.
Yeah, randomly, Mexico, I won't say where it was, but I happened to walk into one. It was like a carnival,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's there, and I'd never seen anything like it. It's still pretty brutal.
Yeah.
What they do. It's pretty crazy.
It's bad, yeah.
So on a day-to-day basis, do you have a clinic that you actually work on a day-to-day basis as well, or what do you do normally before we get into Chernobyl?
I did. I owned a veterinary practice for 20 years in Sandy, Oregon, and when I was working, I also worked, for the ASPCA and also for the Department of Health and Human Services as on NVRT. So those were all just intermittent things. When I sold my practice in 2017, and then that's when I was able to devote my time entirely into just running 2 nonprofit organizations, which pretty much keeps me really busy.
Which is really cool, by the way, because if I could do that, if I could find a job for that, that's probably what I would do too. I love doing that kind of stuff.
I'd like to get paid. I don't get paid. It's all volunteer. So it's I work more now than I did when I was actually getting paid. So
well, it's funny is because I do, as I mentioned when we were talking, I do a lot of volunteer work, and I've never been paid ever. I can't imagine what that must feel like to be able to do that too. But it may take away from it as well. So let's talk about, and I'm going to segue into Chernobyl, but let's talk about CFF and how they got started, what they do, and then let's dig into the whole thing in Chernobyl.
Okay, so Clean Futures Fund is a nonprofit organization where we provide assistance to those affected by disasters, and in this instance, industrial accident centered around Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. And how it's got started was our founder, Eric Kambarian, went to Chernobyl on a radiation safety training course. And he happened to look around and saw all of these dogs. And at that point, this was 2016 or 16, there were thousands of dogs. There were a lot of dogs everywhere. And he's like, what is with all of the dogs? And they said, well, they've been here, ever since, and they migrated in these certain areas, and they're just here. And well, why don't you do anything about it? Why don't you, do any kind of is there any kind of sterilization procedures or anything in PAC? And they said, no. At one point they tried to, the government tried to come in and exterminate them all, but that didn't go over very well. And this is different from, the Chernobyl series way back in '86 when they tried to exterminate them all.
Right.
They've also tried several culling processes where they've hired people to come in, and that did not go over well at all with the workers, because they treat these animals like their own. They adopt them, internally, and they feed them and they care for them. And when they have puppies, they provide blankets and make beds for them, and they treat them as if they're their own. So when they tried to do that, it didn't go over very well. So at that point, Eric, he's not a veterinarian, but he does love animals, and he said, well, there must be a way that we can start something to do that. And at that same time, there was also some people that were workers from the power plant that were having some health issues, and could not afford to even buy the medications that they had. And these health issues are most likely related to their long-term work at the Chernobyl power plant. And so at that time, he took up a collection of money to help buy this medication, and it went very well. And so that's sort of how the idea gets started. Clean Futures Fund was this nonprofit to be able to help these people that live in the Chernobyl exclusion zone or have dedicated their lives to working in this area. And then also that's when the culmination of the Dogs of Chernobyl program got started as well. So he reached out and got some sponsorships from SPCA International, and then that's how the first Dogs of Chernobyl program got started in 2017.
And again, I'm not trying. It's kind of like the dessert is Chernobyl dogs, but I know that they're also doing things like orphanages and for kids and that too.
Yeah.
What are they doing with that too? Because it's bigger than just the dogs, which I think is really great, by the way.
So with there in Slavutic is what they call the Chernobyl worker town, and that is where all of the people who work at the Chernobyl power plant live. It was a town. It's the youngest city in all of Ukraine. It was developed after the explosion, the disaster. Most of the people that lived in Pripyat then migrated over to this area to live in this town of Slavutic. And so you have children that were in orphanages there. You have children that are disabled, whether they're related to Chernobyl or not, we don't know, but they're just in an area where it's a big community. And so the children, we supported the children's program with the orphanage, buying medications, things that they needed. We work quite a lot with Blagodar, which is a disability center there. And that's not just children, it's all ages. These children and people that have certain disabilities. We also work with the Retired Workers Fund. So all of these people who have worked their lives, their whole life term at the power plant, don't have a huge pension to support the medications that they need, whether it just be diabetes medications or thyroid medications. And so we support those people as well to be able to help provide assistance when needed.
Which is really cool. And I know right now, as I mentioned to you, I've been to Ukraine twice since the war started. They're probably even more needed now with everything going on.
Yes. Right now, so the town of Slavutic, how they used to get to work was to take a 45-minute train ride that goes through Belarus and then into Chernobyl. Well, first of all, you don't want to drive through Belarus at the moment. And the other is that the train tracks were blown up for safety to prevent anybody from coming into the area. So the people that still do work at the power plant, instead of a 45-minute train ride daily, they now have to take a 6.5-hour bus ride, and they have to live at the power plant for 2 weeks at a time. So they're on 2-week shifts. They did do a huge amount of layoffs since the occupation. So it's a struggling town. They did get a lot of people coming into the area of Slavutic, what we call internally displaced people, or people call them refugees.
ITP.
Right, refugees, but internally displaced people. And so there is a lot of areas, a lot of apartments that were available because this town has been just kind of diminishing because of the no more work at the power plant. So it's become an area for these people to come and live and be able to have a house that's fairly safe. They've also turned the hospital into a rehabilitation center for the injured soldiers from the war that have a place to come and rehabilitate. If they've lost a limb or they've lost a leg or something, they come to this area. And we've also provided assistance to be able to provide a lot of the equipment, medical equipment and rehabilitation equipment to help with these soldiers as well.
Which is awesome too.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
So the power plant is operational now. Is that I just don't I didn't dig deep enough on there. So when we get to Chernobyl and we think about the nuclear plant, there's the exclusion area, there's the power plant, and Chernobyl City. Can you kind of define what they actually are and what they do, and then we can really dig into the dog thing?
Sure. So the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone was an area that was established after the accident to contain this area to prevent any kind of spread. This is where most of the radiation contaminants had fallen. And so there's a 30-kilometer exclusion zone, and then there's a 10-kilometer exclusion zone. The 30-kilometer exclusion zone is pretty much this huge, vast area. As you come into this area, you come into Chernobyl town, which is inside of the 10, or just outside of the 10-kilometer exclusion zone. And then you travel further in and you get to the power plant, which is directly right within the 10-kilometer exclusion zone. This area, there are areas in there that are significantly what we call hot, have a lot of contamination, and then there are areas that have basically nothing.
Right.
It just depends on the fallout and what has dissipated over time. So the power plant itself is non-functional, and they shut all of the reactors down one by one after that explosion.
Right.
So it's not producing any power, but it does act as a switch yard. So it does control a lot of the power that goes to Kyiv and other areas. There's also, for the next 100, 200 years, they're going to have to be doing something with the spent fuel. And so they're constantly getting the spent fuel and moving it to other areas. And so they're constantly dealing with that. So that's why there are still workers there every single day. They have to do something with what's left over from the power plant reserves.
So and that is radioactive fuel, basically. Is that what that is?
It's it's a common thing that you have from any type of a power plant or a nuclear power plant.
Okay.
You're going to have waste product for making this. And that waste product, that's what the cooling ponds are for. Basically, they have to cool this stuff down before they can remove it to some other area. No, they have to store it. They have to do something with it because this is all waste product that's been made.
Right.
You can't dump it in the ocean. You can't just bury it in the ground. A lot of times they encase it in concrete. But every single power plant makes this all over the world. And so it's not just Chernobyl. This isn't because of this is not because of the damage that happened in Chernobyl. This is a nuclear power plant waste product.
Okay. I got that now. So let's talk about you. How did you end up being really the point person now, I would assume, with Chernobyl dogs? How did you get there from Portland then, I guess, at that point? How did you end up getting there?
Yeah, so I have been doing nonprofit work, going to other countries and providing free spay and neuter, and with another organization. And when this program started to develop, a friend of mine who I knew worked with at NVRT, he was asked to go. He also does the same thing, goes and does spay and neuter and everything. And he was asked to go over there and help with this program. And he had contacted me as well and said, hey, I'm going to be there, but I can't be there the whole time. Can you help out? And I said, unfortunately, I couldn't because I was in the middle of selling my practice right at that time. I said, but I would love to help you after that. And so they did their first campaign in 2017, which I was not there. But just right after that, they asked me to come on board, and and I was planning, for the next campaign. But then he ended up leaving and not continuing with the program. And so at that point, that's when Eric had asked me. He said, "You have this experience, and I need somebody that can take over the program. And can you do that?" And I said, "Sure." So I'd never been to Chernobyl before, but I basically took over it in the end of 2017 and started planning for the next campaign, which was in June of 2018, and got a roster of people, and then we just kind of went from there.
So let's talk about what you guys are. I want to talk about the dog specifically, but when you guys go there, when you do a campaign, let's talk, and let's start at the beginning, because you alluded to it earlier when the fallout happened in, I think, 86. They didn't let any of the people bring their dogs, or their pets weren't allowed to. When they had to evacuate, they had to leave their dogs. And then they did the culling program where they were going around trying to kill them because they didn't want to spread the contamination. And from that, let's move forward from that and just kind of talk the story out.
Okay, so there were a lot of animals that when they were trying to cull them, they ran off into the woods. And when they started to rebuild the power plant or take care of the destruction, the dogs started to migrate back out of the woods, looking in search for food and in search for people, because that's what domesticated dogs do, is they look for people and be around people where the food is. And so these dogs have been reproducing over the years, so we're looking 30, 40 years down the line. That these animals have been there. And so your population is going to, kind of wax and wane over the years, depending on diseases or predation, wolf predation, things like that. And so, but it had, because of the building of the new safe confinement, you had a whole bunch more people in this area from all over the world building this new safe confinement to put over the old sarcophagus. And so the increase in people, you're going to increase the dogs. People are feeding them. People are caring for them. So an animal that might not survive very long, we're then now living longer enough to have a bunch of puppies, and that just perpetuates it. So that's where we came in, and we started the program to start the sterilization. The very first one in 2017 was just a very small crew. They didn't really know exactly what they were doing. They hired a catcher, and he helped, to go blow dart some of the dogs and catch them. And then they realized the mass amount of animals that were there. And they said, wow, we really need to beef things up and get a bigger crew. And so that's in 2018. We had a lot of people. We had too many people, put it that way. A lot of people. We were there for a whole month. And we had two different teams that came in the first 2 weeks and the second 2 weeks. And, at that time, I think we did something like 200 or 300 and something. I don't have my figures with it's been a long time. It's 8 years now. 300 and something animals at that point, that in 2018. And it's, I can go with my other organization and in, I was in St. John last week, and then we did 340 feral cats in 4 days. But with these dogs here, they're everywhere and they hide, and you have to blow dart them. And so one blow dart of a dog, that can be 45 minutes to an hour before you actually have that dog and bring it back. So that's why it's a long, drawn out process. And that's why it took us a whole month to do 300 and something animals.
Yeah, but your guys are doing a lot more now. But so you started that, and let's kind of dig in now, talk about the dogs, and the debunk some of the things that people think, right? Let's save the blue dog thing to the end. But let's talk about, when I hear radiation, you always hear about cancer and all these other things. And obviously there's a lot of dogs there still that are, multiple generations later, but still, walk through what the real thing is. I mean, the perception's completely different. They're not glowing in the dark and doing all the weird things that people say. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I did a lot of reading on that. And by the way, I didn't mention this. I had an episode on the free ranging dogs in Morocco, and it sounds to me some of it's kind of similar from the standpoint of longevity and things like that.
Yes, the people think, oh, Chernobyl dogs only live 3 to 4 years. Well, that's because of the harsh environment and such. It's not because of they live in Chernobyl. There's no evidence whatsoever at this point that the radiation that they're living in, the contamination that they're living in, has any negative or positive effect on them. It's all still being studied. But the thing is, the dogs don't live long enough. It takes a long time to develop cancers because of whatever reason, whether it's radiation or whether it's just environmental contamination or genetics. It takes a long time, and dogs don't live as long as humans, so you don't see those cancers developing. We do have some dogs that are now 12 years of age that have shown up with some types of cancers, bone cancer specifically. But it's also in large breed dogs and the type of bone cancers that we're seeing. Is it because it's just a large breed dog that's developing its typical bone cancer that it does, in the United States, or is it because of the environment that they're growing up in? We don't know that at this point.
Right.
So, but they haven't. There hasn't been any evidence that the dogs are evolving rapidly, that they've become immune to radiation, that they've adapted to their environment to make them healthier. None of that. They're living longer because of our spay-neuter program, our medical care that we provide them, the housing we give them, the food that we give them, and then just the overall care of the packs. That's why they're living longer. It's not because they've adapted or become immune to cancer. There was a paper. It wasn't even a real published paper. It was just an abstract of a doctor that stated that the wolves in Belarus have become immune to cancer or resistant to cancer. And there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Yeah.
I love crazy stuff.
Yeah.
It's so silly.
Yeah.
Well, the thing though, that again, obviously I did some of my homework, but it's still fascinating to me. It's because they're isolated. And by the way, and let's get into the two different distinct genetic dogs you have. You got the ones in the exclusion area and the ones in is it the city area or whatever, that they're genetically different because they're pretty isolated. So it's a great way to do a case study for anything, I would think. But why are the genetics different? It's just because they're just mating with the ones in their area and then the other ones just stay away from the other ones? Is that how it works? Or
Yeah, correct. So they're separated by 4 miles of pretty much woods and nothing in between.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tend to hang around where people are. So the ones at the power plant, they've been in this area, and we have evidence that there has been no introduction of a different type of dog into this area since way back when. So they've been interbreeding with their fathers to daughters and brothers and sisters, and so we have the genetic tree. We can see who was the main father and who had fathered a lot of these animals. And so all of them tend to stay in this same area because that's where the food is, that's where the people are, and they don't really migrate off. And there hasn't been, so they're distinct in the fact that their genes are all just kind of in this isolated little population.
Right.
And that's probably because of environment. It's probably, also because of the kind of the pack mentality that they have. Whenever another dog tries to come into their area, they chase them away. They don't allow them. And that's just kind of a normal thing that happens. They have packs within their packs as well. It's pretty crazy. You'll be in one area and they'll follow you as you're walking through, and then all of a sudden the entire pack of dogs that are following you stop and they don't follow you anymore. And then you look ahead and you see another group of dogs, and they know where their zone is. They're like, yeah, I'm not going in there. I'm going to get beat up.
West Side Story.
Yeah. So Chernobyl town is another area where we have that we studied all of these animals, and There is evidence of some, not a lot, but some influx of dogs. We're still in this exclusion zone, but there's not fences around. And people do enter in and out of this checkpoint in Ditki-Atki. And so there are animals that can come from the town of Ditki-Atki and come into this area. And so they can wander in and migrate in. So there has been some different types of dogs that have shown up in this population of dogs. Still, 80% of it is this Chernobyl dog type of dog, which is descendant of I believe the shepherd and the Russian hound dog is what they've isolated most of it. And then the other study that we did was we studied the dogs that were in Slavudic, which is 45 kilometers away, that you have to take a train through Belarus to get to. And of course, those dogs were just a hodgepodge of your typical dogs that you would find in any kind of environment of stray dogs. And so we were able to look at all of those and say, here's one area that's normal and these areas don't have this. And so the fact that we have this isolated population of dogs where no new dogs are coming in, it's kind of several fold. One is that they can now look at that and know that these dogs are the originally dogs from the disaster, from the irradiation. They've been living in this area. They haven't been exposed to anything else. So can they take that and then see if there's any kind of damage to the DNA? Is there any kind of changes that are occurring that we can presumably think that it's coming from the radioactive contamination? And then in Chernobyl town, we also have that population where we can kind of extrapolate there. For me, as a veterinarian, it's one of the only places I know where you have a closed population of feral dogs breeding, that can let people know that spay-neuter population control does work.
Yeah, I want to get that because I read something about you because you did like 750 in one area and 700 in the area, and the puppy population has gone down significantly. Let's talk about that.
So in 2000, so at the new safe confinement, there was a pack of dogs in this area, and all of the years since 2017, we were not very successful in catching these dogs.
I want to talk about you guys had to talk about your outfits. You had to keep changing because they got smart enough to know who you were. I think that's great.
Yeah, so this is at the new safe confinement. We haven't been real successful in the past with these dogs because it's an industrial area. They're building the new safe confinement. There's workers everywhere. There's stuff everywhere. There's holes in fences. And so you would go into this area. These dogs are a lot more fearful. And you would blow dart one dog and it would cause all of them, the others, to take off and disappear. And they'd go through fences. They go into areas that you can't go into that are highly restricted. So we would go into this area and we would maybe get 5 dogs from this area, and that's it. And we try all week long. And just to get into this area, it takes 3 or 4 hours just to get into this area because of all of the checks and things you have to go through. So it's not an easy thing. So we would only do it on one day and we would go. So all over the years, we weren't successful in this area. Then that's when we tried, okay, well, they're afraid of us. Maybe if we dress up like the Novarka workers, because they're the ones feeding them, maybe they'll come to us. And so we've tried that, and that wasn't successful. They still wouldn't come to us. And even when I go today, I'll go in, I'm just in regular clothes, female with a soft voice calling to them, which they will react to. They still won't come to me. But then one of the workers will come up who feeds them every day, and they'll go right up to him. So that's just the nature of how it works. But in this particular area, we weren't successful. But what had happened was during the occupation, the Russian occupation, they captured all of the workers and put them in a bunker and wouldn't let them out. They were able to get out and do some of their work, but nobody was able to feed the dogs. Mm-hmm. And they sat there for 30 days and just starved. People say, oh, they know how to catch animals. No, they don't. They're domestic dogs that are used to dog food and scraps from the canteen. Right. And so when these dogs were basically starving to death is what was happening for 30 days of no food. They were able to get a little bit of scraps here and there. Some of the workers risked their lives to go out there and feed some of them as they were walking from one area to another area for their job that they had to do. So as soon as the liberation of the power plant, the very first thing was I I got some photos, said, please send me some photos. And it was horrible. They were all just, you could see their ribs. They were just skin and bones.
Emancipated and terrible.
Yeah. And so I told Eric, I said, we need to go and evaluate. We need to get some food in there right away. And so that's when we started trucking the food in. Nobody was allowed in this area except the workers. And so we loaded the bus up with bags of dog food. And, some of the workers didn't even like dogs, but they were carrying bags of dog food. I called every person that I could think of that I knew on the chat group, everything, said, please, can you just grab one bag of dog food for me? And so it was pretty amazing that they all came together to be able to help these dogs. So they could see them, even if they're not a dog person, they could see this dog is starving to death.
Right.
And so that's how we started bringing the food in. And so, at this point, these dogs came back and started, getting fatter and getting healthy again. And then, of course, they started breeding. And so this one particular area, which we have not been successful at, all of a sudden just flourished, just blew up. And then in October of 2022, we went and I had communicated with one of the workers, Yuri, and got him to train these dogs to go into a pen, a corral that we had them make for us in 2 different areas. And so when we showed up, Yuri got his dog food and said, come on, dogs. And they all followed him into this, 30 by 30 pen. Maybe it was bigger than that, 40 by 40, something like that. And then we just closed the gate, and then we just went in and were able to catch them or give them. A lot of them I gave tainted meatballs with sedatives so we can get near them. And the ones that we couldn't get, we were able to at least blow dart them within the pen there. So we were able to capture all 125 of them in 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And the success has been significant, right? So, I mean, that's the key. I mean, obviously you're doing spay and neuter all over the place, and you talk to anybody anywhere else in the world, spay and neuter is the big issue, right? So what's the future? How many dogs are there now in the area, would you say, roughly?
Okay. So when we were there, that particular week where we did all the dogs at the new safe confinement, there was one dog and one dog only that we could not catch. And I came, so that was in October. I came back again in May, just before May, and they said she had puppies.
Of course.
The one dog. So had we caught her, she was pregnant. So, just a couple weeks later, she had puppies, and she had 5 puppies. And by the time that I got there back in May to catch her, we did catch her and the 5 puppies. 2 of them they've already bred. So one was pregnant already, and one of them had ran off. So those were the puppies that were born, and the one dog, male dog, had run off, and we didn't catch him. So when we went back months later, there were no new puppies. The next year, there were no new puppies. The next year after that, there were no new puppies. So in this area, we have one female dog in this area that has not been spayed because we can't catch her. However, she has not had any puppies.
I like her.
Yeah. So that's kind of a testament that it does work. Now, yes, you're going to have one dog get in there somehow, some way. And that's what they keep saying. Well, she hasn't had any puppies because she's not, the males are all neutered.
Right.
You know what? Eventually a male is going to find his way in that area. He can smell her, and he's going to, to impregnate her. So that's my goal, is to catch her. But you can see that there are no new puppies in 3 years. We don't have any new puppies.
That's amazing.
Whereas if you go to an area, you can sterilize 700 animals and come back the next year, and you're like, why are we still sterilizing animals? It's because the new ones come in the area. They're going to breed. You just leave one that can have 15 puppies, and that's just, it starts all over again.
So when you guys are there in that area, it sounds like you don't have to wear any protective clothing or anything like that, or do you?
We do. So at the new safe confinement, in order to enter this area, we have to go through a whole body counter, radiation counter. So we go into this area, we get measured. We're then given 2 different types of dosimeters. We have to wear plant issued clothing. So clothing, protective clothing, jackets, special boots. In this particular area, we don't have to wear, in one of the areas, so it's kind of hard to explain. When you go right into the power plant, yes, you have to have more protective clothing. When you go a little bit outside of that, you have to have somewhat less protective clothing, but still protective clothing that they issue to us. And so we have to wear that. But the entire time we're there, we are wearing dosimeters that's calculating how much radiation we're getting exposed to.
And you're wearing mask and headgear as well?
You're only wearing that when we're inside of the new safe confinement. Right outside of it, we don't have to wear masks. We do wear gloves because the contamination is usually external. And so you don't want to, rub your eyeball.
Right, yeah.
You don't want to, touch your lips or, swallow. The problem is it doesn't penetrate the skin. Beta radiation does not penetrate the skin, but you don't want to ingest it. And so people erroneously, wipe their eyes or lick their fingers or whatever. And so they can get it inside them. So.
Yeah, it's crazy.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
One of the things is that, just from an outsider looking in a little bit, and you're an insider looking in, what is radiation, these dogs are surviving through it. And obviously, you said they get cancer for a while, but it doesn't sound like it's as bad as we all fear. And am I wrong there, or am I half right?
If they were living in the red forest, which is one of the most radioactive places that there is, if they were living in there day after day after day after day, I would imagine there would be some significant changes that they would have. The big misconception is they think that Chernobyl, all of it's radioactive.
Right.
And there's only certain areas that are particularly hot. A lot of areas that have hardly anything. Even right at the power plant, there's some areas that have hardly anything. And so, yeah, they're not having any issue. They're having the normal issues of a stray dog, lack of housing, lack of food, environmental conditions like the weather, wolves that come into the areas and attack them. And so there's not just the fact that they're in Chernobyl doesn't mean that they're really any, more problematic or have any more issues than a dog living in the Caribbean.
Well, it's funny because one of the things I read, and you kind of debunked that for me even, is that one of the things I read is that typically the animals there live 3 to 6 years. But if you talk to the people like the free ranging dogs, and I'm going to use Morocco because they've been doing that study for a long time, that's about how long they live. And the reason being is that they're not inoculated. They're eating, basically garbage, and they get in accidents. Generally, it's that kind of stuff. And it sounds to me that it's very similar. Obviously, the weather's harsh there, and you've got, the wolves, which are preying on them as well. But that sounds like the main reason why these animals are not living as long. And that's the only reason, maybe, I guess, at a small level, it has to do with the radiation, but not really. It sounds like that to me, pretty much. It's
100% what you said. They're not living as long because of the environmental factors, not because of the radiation. But people say, oh, yeah, Chernobyl dogs only live 2 to 3 years.
And they glow in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but you're also looking at any kind of feral populations, the same thing.
Right.
They were not living as long, 2 to 3 years, because of disease, because of hit by car, because of wolf predation, because of freezing in the winter, all of those things that are out of our control if there's not a human to help control it.
Right. In a domestic situation.
Correct. So with our program coming in, providing medical care, providing housing and food and vet and, vaccinations and spay and neuter, that these dogs are living longer now,
Right.
because they're being cared for by humans.
Yeah, well, and that's a factor, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the blue dog thing. I know what this is. It's funny when I first saw that, the painter, the guy that does all the blue dogs, I thought, that guy was way ahead of his time when I first saw the thing about it. But for you guys listening, I'm sure there's several people that are big animal people that have seen the thing, talking about the dogs in Chernobyl being blue. And I'm gonna pass it to you because I think it's hilarious and it's so typical of the world today in so many ways.
So in October, we were in Chernobyl town catching dogs, and the leader of our catching team, Darren, I was back at the clinic, sent me a text and said, "Hey, sent me a picture of this dog." And I said, "Catch it." And he says, No, why is it blue?" And I said, I don't know why it's blue, but just catch it and bring it back. We need to sterilize it. And he said that there's a couple of them here, and they're asking us, why are they blue? And I'm like, they rolled in something, obviously. I don't know why. We'll find out. And they weren't able to catch him. But he did, take the photos and sent them back, took a lot of photos. And so all week long, we kept going back to this area to catch these particular dogs. And they were very, very fearful of us, these particular dogs. And so every day we went back, we looked around this whole area. They weren't there. The last day that we were there, we did see them off in the distance, and they were a lot less blue. We had a big rainstorm come in, and they were a lot less blue. So we weren't able to catch them. But so we looked around in the area, and in the area close to the area where they were, there was a portable toilet that had been kind of smashed in a little bit and had some juice coming out of it. We don't know for sure that that's what they rolled in, but that's the most likely scenario. Our shoes turned kind of blue when we got in it. I know what that blue stuff is. It's just a deodorizer, which is actually harmless. People say, "Oh, doesn't it have formaldehyde?" No, it's just a deodorizer that they put in there to make it bearable for you to walk in there.
Exactly. It's those blue things you put in your toilet.
Yeah. So dogs, they love to roll in nasty smelling, poopy stuff, and that's most likely what happened. There are some. It is there are some. It's an industrial area, so there are some chemicals and things around in this area that they could have also gotten into. I didn't see any of it. There's a cast iron pipe plant, an old cast iron pipe that's there. I didn't see anything from that area either. I just saw this one toilet, and so I was like, well, that's possibly what they got into. I can't say 100% that's what they got into, but that's our likely assumption.
If you're an animal person, you're on social media, it blew up. Everybody's saying there are blue dogs in Chernobyl. What?
Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
It's crazy. And, I had seen the articles a couple of years ago about the blue dogs in Russia, outside of Moscow. And it was the same thing. They get rolled in some chemical waste product from a plant that was nearby. It wasn't a nuclear plant, but it was some sort of an industrial plant. And they were bright, bright blue. And same thing happened to them, that though it blew up. And so when Darren sent me the photo back, and I said, "Don't you remember the dogs from Russia?" And he's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." So I, sent him the article at that time. And so I knew it was, people were going to think otherwise. And so that's why when I did post the video on TikTok, I put a caption in there that says, "We don't know what they got into, but they obviously got into something." Of course, nobody reads that, right?
Right, of course.
They took it as blue dogs in Chernobyl, and they're turning blue, and the radiation is turning them blue, and all that. And I was like, no, we never said that at all. Matter of fact, I specifically said it's not from radiation. So
I love it. I think it's great. So, as we're closing up, a couple things. Can you tell people how they can help fund CFF and maybe even some of the other organizations you're working with, and whatever they can do to support the blue dogs of Chernobyl?
Sure. So, we are a 100% all volunteer organization. None of us take a paycheck, and we survive completely on donations and then some grants that we get from some other animal organizations. And so the biggest way is monetary donation. People want to send us things, and it's not easy to bring it into the zones. Half the time, 90% of the stuff is stuff we can't use or is not helpful. And so the best thing would be to monetary donation so that we could purchase the medications that we need for these animals. And that is on our website. It's cleanfutures.org. And there's a donate button there. And if you want it to go specifically to the dogs, you can put in the comment section, just dogs. If you want it to go to the children of Chernobyl or to the workers fund of Chernobyl, you can, we separate all that out and we allot the money for what goes to what so that they know that their dollar is going to what they want it to. And you'd be surprised. There are people who have said, I don't want 1 cent to go to humans. I want it to go to animals, which is really weird, but they do that and whatever, if that's what they choose, we do follow that. We do have a bookkeeper that she puts a report every month. This amount came in from Chernobyl dogs. This amount came in for the children. This amount came to wherever needed most. The other is on our website. We do have a store. People love to have a lot of our products, T-shirts and our patches that are made in Slavutic, Ukraine.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so they're always a conversation starter. So even if they just have a T-shirt, wearing a T-shirt, the fact that other people ask them, what is that? And they're able to discuss what they've learned. It also helps spread awareness about our organization. We're a small organization. There's just Eric and I that are the two main board members. We have Tom is also a board member. He's more in the background. And then we have our team that we use to go in there and that's it. And so it's just the two of us that are surviving on social media and just awareness of our organization.
And being forced to be on podcasts.
Yeah. So yeah, any help, any kind of help, whether it be media exposure or just exposure for purchasing or giving donations would be incredibly helpful. And it tells the story. There are dogs out there that can't leave this area, and there are people that are caring for them.
Exactly. And for you guys listening, it's in the description of the episode as well. Just go to the wherever you listen to podcasts, it'll be in there. Anything else that we missed? Anything else that people can do to help? Anything you can think of before we go to my favorite thing, the joke? Anything else?
Just the big thing is education is key. Read published articles. Peer reviewed published articles. And not believe clickbait stuff. If you're gonna read all of the media out there, make sure it's from a reputable one, because there's a lot of, I get frustrated sometimes with some of the things that I read. I start laughing and just the captions that they put on there, and it has nothing to do with anything that's correct. So just be aware that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and to get your information from trusted sources.
Yeah, well, on everything these days, not just blue dogs.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, the AI out there is very believable somewhat. Yeah,
it's pretty scary. Okay, so we're going to do the joke now. So I'm going to tell the joke today, and I can hear people cringing already on this thing. But as I always say, if you want to be on the show, you've got grandkids, nieces, nephews, your kids, you want to be on the show, if you email me at mkyle@thefurrealpodcast.com, I promise you, Jennifer, myself would really rather have you tell the jokes, because you know how bad mine are. And also, pass the word out, because, without you guys, we don't get this thing out there. So I found a joke that's related to what we're talking about today. So just grin and bear it, Jen. Here we go. So what do Chernobyl dogs call visitors at the gates?
I don't know.
Their new nuclear family. I'm so sorry. I told you it was bad. Anyways, most importantly, Jen, thanks so much for taking your time to be on. It, having people like you on here is really great. And I know you're really busy, and I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me and the time to tell our story.
And then for everybody else that's out there listening, as I always say, again, listen, follow, send comments, do whatever to help us grow. If you got ideas for great ideas for the guest or anything like that, please let me know as well. But most importantly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Markakyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.